welcome to Astrology Today with Jeff Harman. I'm Ella, Jeff's assistant. Great to see you all. Thanks so much for joining us. You know we're here every Friday, and I mentioned last week that now you can find us on Spotify as well. So if you'd rather listen than watch, we're available there. Today, Jeff is going to go into the significance of the moon, the all-powerful moon, how it influences our lives. It's very, very, very interesting. So let's get started, Jeff.
Yeah, I think the big thing I want to focus on is we have a new moon coming up. On January 3rd, we had the final quarter of the moon. And of course, every month, the moon joins the sun. This is really, really significant. Why? Because the sun is the seed and the moon is the crucible. And I know there's tons of conspiracy theories out there about the moon, and some of them I have to kind of agree with. But the moon is very mysterious. Throughout history, throughout all humanity's history, they've always been enamored with the moon. And the moon is also synonymous with the womb and also the nurturing effect of the soil of the earth. This is why the Farmer's Almanac and almost all of your agricultural societies had followed the moon throughout history. So I thought we'd focus a little bit on that today because the moon is always something that really affects almost every single thing on this planet. It affects the tides. It affects our blood flow. In fact, many of your Ayurvedic doctors and various different practitioners will tell you if you want to do parasite cleanses, start it about 5 days before the new moon. Now that's a generalized, kind of thing, but it's true because why? You'll find the blood flow is higher or fluid flow seems to be higher right before the new moon as it peaks to the new moon and about the week after. So there's a lot of ancient lore about this that is quite fascinating. And new moons are always new beginnings. Well, we have a new moon coming up when? On January 11th, and that's right around the corner next week. So this is going to happen in the tropical zodiac at 20 degrees, 44 minutes of Capricorn. And this is an interesting new moon. It's actually really good. Why? Because it's the first new moon of the new year. Right? So you notice every year we always kind of feel wiped out after the holidays. You got the New Year's and then everybody's, setting their New Year's goals, right? Everybody wants to lose weight. Everybody wants to do this, set a new goal, change. And it's a really actually kind of invigorating energy. And it's even more so when you pay attention to the moon. So again, new moons are a time of planting, of impregnating your mind, if you will, with goal setting. It seems to have a more powerful effect when we do that. And what's interesting is this in the sidereal zodiac is going to happen at 26 degrees Sagittarius, 35 minutes. And it's going to happen in a really powerful lunar mansion called Pura Vashada. And it's very powerful. Why? Because it brings dignity and balance to things. It's also really good for maintenance and productivity. And the other reason why no two new moons are exactly the same. Why? They're making all different types of aspects in the matrix of the sky. Secondly, it affects your chart differently. You have to look at the house that the new moon happens in. And for all of us, it's going to happen in a different house. You look at your rising sign, and then you look at which of the 12 houses does it happen in. And what you'll find is if it's happening in your first house, it's really important for personal things. The second house, it's all about money, resources, and how you handle them. The third house is siblings, daily activities, neighbors, all that type of thing, local transit. And the fourth house is home, family, real estate, right? Among other things and endings. The fifth is children, progeny. It also has to do with plays and speculation, stock trading. The sixth is animals, small pets. Also has to do with health, also has to do with focuses on people you hire, work for hire. The seventh is partnerships and relationships. See what I'm doing? You just go around the house and look at the meanings of all the houses throughout the chart, when you go through the chart. Seventh house is partnerships and relationships you have with others. The 8th is transformation. It's also other people's money. It's also rebirth and transformation and all that stuff. I'm being brief here. The 9th is legal things, higher knowledge, education, wisdom, spirituality, religions, all that stuff. The 10th is career. If you have a new moon in the 10th house, you're really going to be focused on, hey, how am I going to accomplish a better, way of doing things in my career? Also, it's how we comport out to the world, our purpose. So it's very, very powerful. 11th house is friends, groups, and organizations. Also, it can be a bit of luck, too, and hopes and wishes. The 12th house, if you get a new moon in the 12th house, what does that do? Well, that's deep psychological things. It also can rule hidden enemies, hidden things. It also rules very large animals that you don't ride. So really interesting stuff when you start picking apart, where does this happen? And obviously I'm being brief here because you also have to look at what aspects does it make to your chart. And definitely the outer progressions and major transits are going to be the big picture in your life. So depending on where Saturn is, Jupiter is, and all the rest of the outer planets, and the aspects they're making, new moons modify that. There are big triggers to that. But this overall new moon is good. And remember, I mentioned last podcast, Mercury was going direct right on the first of the year. And so was Jupiter. Jupiter had just gone direct the day before. And what's interesting, I said, this could expose a lot of truth. Well, look what's been happening. We're hearing a lot of truths come out in a lot of areas. Of course, the Epstein thing is all over the news, right? They're all chirping about that. Bill Clinton and all the other people that are on the lists that are coming out. Don't worry, they'll never get prosecuted. They never do because, they're in the fold. But the interesting thing is the truths are coming out. Also, a lot of other truths are coming out, a lot of legal stuff that we're hearing about, the elections and all this other stuff here coming up. And, so it's a lot of very interesting information that's coming out. And this new moon is actually really productive. And I'll tell you why, because Mars is also making a nice trine to Jupiter, which just went direct at the same time. Now, for you tropical astrologers, it's happening. Mars is exalted in Capricorn, aspecting Jupiter. So it's a powerful aspect. It's very forceful when you have a powerful Mars throwing its energy. It's like a pitcher throwing a ball fast. It's got a lot of punch. So very powerful. And this is a good time at this time of the year to be setting new goals, to be looking at, productive ways you can do things. Whatever it is that you need to do, whether it's something you've been wanting to do for a long time or something you want to pursue, this is a great time to plant those seeds. You know what the ancients used to do? And I'll tell you, I have to admit, I do this myself. You can light a candle on the new moon. Now, some people do it right exactly. If you have access to an astrology program, you can actually do this right as the moon approaches the sun. And you'll notice it's pretty fast if you have the ability to look at an astrology program, which are pretty doggone accurate. And what's interesting is it crosses through the eye of the sun, and it's called Kazumi or Kasimi. People pronounce it differently. It's 17 minutes before and 17 minutes after the sun. It's a very powerful time. And if you get in touch with the psychic energy, you can really feel it. It has a very interesting, solemn feel. And it'll be different for all of us depending on what house it's in and what aspects it makes, etc. But it's very powerful, and people would do deep meditations. One of the techniques is you could take any negativity that you want to wash away and push it through the bottom of the flame where it's blue, consuming the wick of matter and going up into the divine light. And wonderful idea. Have a pencil, piece of paper, write down aspirations and things you want to pursue. Now, obviously, the moon is only 30 days long, right? You can't, accomplish conquering the world or whatever it is you want to do. Hopefully it's not that. But the bottom line is whatever we want to do. If they're long-term goals, you can be working at sub-goals towards that. Or if it is a long-term goal, it's a great time to set it. So this is very powerful, being the new moon of the new year. And like I've been saying, 2024 is going to be an interesting year. A lot of dynamic stuff is likely to come loose. We've got the economy like a tightrope right now. And then also we've got a number of other things going on in the world. A lot of people getting killed, which is not very good. And, again, we've got a lot of things brewing. And that can be put in your meditations too, where you put out there that literally you want to see the world's insanity get resolved a little bit here. We often think our thoughts and our prayers or our intentions don't have much power, but they actually do. They say collectively, humanity's whole thought form elementals have a very powerful influence. This is why we see during wars, when you get nations fired up, what do most nations and governors do and people running these nations? They push very, very hard to get national momentum behind it, right? For the cause, all these things. We see it throughout history. This has always been done. Defend your country, or whatever it is, which is good because it does work. But the overall collective mindset of humanity has a huge effect on the astral worlds. See, we emit thought forms out of the third eye chakra, whether we're aware of it or not. Again, Dr. Emoto was the guy who I really think gave us scientific proof, as much as you can get, to prove what thoughts are, because he showed all these different shapes in waters. Actually, absolutely profound. And out of all the billions of dollars of scientific equipment, Emoto comes along with what? Water and a petri dish and a microscope and proves what the ancients have been saying forever. This is why we become what we think about. And again, one of my oldest expressions that I loved that I had heard many years ago was, what you are, speak so loudly, I can't hear a word that you're saying. In other words, we can't hide who we are. We can read it in the physiognomy of our faces. We can see it in our body languages, and we can see it in our actions. People project what's in their hearts, or you could say their subconscious minds, which is really a connection to the spirit, to the lower consciousness. So this is powerful stuff to get in touch with for the new moon. And I can't say enough about the new moon. Another thing too that I've always looked at is I've got a text that is really, you can't get it anymore, but it's amazing. It's looking at the fixed stars in the sidereal zodiac for each single degree. And even in the Bible, they talk about the Shem Hemiphores, which are the 72 angels that rule the firmament. A lot of secrets to that one, let me tell you. That gets at some real deep Enochian stuff there too. But this particular new moon is happening in what we call the degree of eloquence, which is really wonderful because it denotes inspiration and artistic creativity and ideas. And again, AI is impressing us all. Isn't it amazing how fast it is? But if you really look at half the artwork AI puts out, it kind of sucks, I think. It's pretty manufactured. And there's nothing like my grandmother used to paint. Amazing art. I mean, just go look at some of the art in the museums. Now, there's some reality for us outside of AI, right? And look at the artistic creativity that humans have done throughout history. It's breathtaking. So this is a time where we can become more inspirational, more artistic, and more creative. Yes, the world's crazy. Yes, the world's going to keep being crazy. It's always been crazy. If you're waiting for the world to not be crazy, don't hold your breath. But we all are on our own track. And if we keep centered and keep focused, you just keep on going on. And that's the message I would have for this new moon, because I think it's going to be a powerful one for many of us.
That's really exciting. That's really exciting. I think we need that. We need something to steer us in a more positive direction. So I'm glad to hear that about the new moon. The moon represents the mother, doesn't it? And the moon also represents emotions. So talk about calling it the all important moon, right? It seems like you ain't got nothing without the moon.
In Nadi astrology, they actually say that the moon rules what they call the manas of the mind. Now, that's kind of a strange term for us Westerners, but what does that mean? That means the essences of the mind is one way to say it. Another way might be the thoughts that we hold and emotionalize as well. It's the processes. This is why human beings are so much more unique than AI will ever be. We are tethered and attached to our souls and our spirits. AI is attached to data. Okay, now handling data fast is really impressive, and human beings have always been impressed with the lower physical, realms of this planet. But ultimately, we are creative. Inspiration and intuition comes from so many unique places. And back to your comment on the astrology, so the moon, especially in interrogation astrology, which is asking questions. A lot of people say to me, geez, Jeff, you don't have my birth time. You don't need it. You can ask questions. They're called interrogations. And that's probably the one that is the most mysterious. It proves the universe is an interactive consciousness. In fact, we're working on a little series right now. Ella and I are working on this, which is really going to be fun. It's called The Interactive Universe, and we hope to come out with it sooner than later. So we're working on it right now. It's a lot of fun. We're working in the studio on that one coming up here. But anyways, back to the point. The moon is always what we call co-ruler of almost every question, unless the moon is ruling the house of the question. Then it definitely becomes that significant factor. But it's interesting, you can see even thought processes. You can actually tell what has happened in a question prior by looking at what the moon separates from in its geometric aspects to the other planets in the zodiacal question. It's called an interrogation. You literally cast a chart. The eastern horizon becomes the querent, and whatever other house pertaining to what you're asking about. I lost my dog, lost my keys, lost whatever, or whatever you're saying, is it in my best interest to pursue a particular course of action, a business, a lawsuit, whatever. You can see by the houses and the aspects in the sky what the probabilities are likely to come. It's not predicting the future. It's predicting probable outcomes based on energies that are in play. No different than two cars going down the road, and if they don't change their courses, they're very likely to do what they do based on where they're at. And of course, very interesting stuff, because consciousness and the moon all interplay. That's why the moon is so important, because our consciousness is so deeply rooted in our egoic sense of self. We tend to be very rooted in what we believe, right? I always, in lawsuits, it's very funny because I work with a lot of attorneys, and, most attorneys will tell you, whenever I hear the phrase, but it's the principle, he knows he's going to make a lot of money, right? Because that person is very rooted in what they believe. And boom, we get a lawsuit, right? And I call it lawfare rather than lawsuits, because it is lawfare. And it's really a very interesting and manipulative world, that whole situation. We'll talk more about that sometime. But the moon really plays into almost any question you can think of. And it's quite profound. One of the last things I want to mention about the magic of the moon is, do you know when we're spanked on the rear end in the delivery room, each day after we draw first breath equals a year. It's like the earth is a time machine. If we live to be 100 years old, the next 100 days after we were born equals the next 100 years. And the ancients knew about this stuff. I mean, and the proof of it is I've got the documents that prove it. Well, how long does it take the moon to go around the earth? About 27 and a half days and about 28 and a half to catch up to where it was. Well, here's the interesting thing. It gets really deep because you have the moon going north and south in latitudes. You have apogees, perigees. It gets really complex, far more than we can get here. But here's the point. In your life, you will probably experience at least twice the secondary progressed moon to go around your chart. Why? All of us live to be 27 or 28 and a half years old. That's one cycle around. By the time you're in your mid to late 50s, it's going to happen again. You see what I'm saying? So, and if we hang around longer, in our 80s, it's going to happen again. And it's different for everyone. It depends on, the cycles and the houses it was in, but it's mind-blowing how accurate it is. The secondary progressed moon is probably one of the most I think, trusted things I look at in readings. It's the first thing I go to. Where's the secondary progressed moon? I had a poor individual just recently, very, very upset, feeling like they didn't want to be on the planet anymore. And what do I see? The progressed moon in the 8th house. And invariably, I know I've had it there, and it's tough. It's tough. Life on Earth ain't easy. And what's interesting about this stuff is when you get a hold of it, it's like talking to someone, in a crisis. It's very hard to get through sometimes. But after that, you can get them to see what those energies were like, and then they reflect back upon it, and they go, wow, I was really more reactive than maybe I should have been. But see, that's growth. That's wisdom. That's what this stuff really benefits us, is to learn to get control of the lower manas of the conscious mind and start connecting to the spirit, psyche, and soul, which is the very magical thing spoken about in many of the ancient texts, particularly the Share Hagilgum. And also I mentioned the Magus of Strovolos. This is why we're here, is to grow. And sometimes it takes pain to grow, because we are in a matrix of reality. There's no question about it. And the moon seems to be the containment of where spirit gets concretized so it can manifest in physical reality. So to conclude this, because it's very complex, but if we just do meditations on the new moon, now a lot of people wait 72 hours after the new moon. And the reason they do that is because of the 72 angels, one cycle around. But yeah, I like doing it right on the new moon, and whatever you choose. If many of you are into the Kabbalah or the other methodologies, etc., you'll find that there's different techniques to this. But whatever works for you, the bottom line is, if you plant the seeds on the new moon within usually the first 1 to 3 days, I like doing it right on it. Very powerful, very, very powerful, and we can do that every single month.
Absolutely. We do that. We do light a candle and an incense. Usually it's frankincense or nakshampa, right? Those are both
It puts
great.
a vibration in the lower air. The whole subject of angels, there's some wonderful texts about this stuff. Angelic forces are literally on the next dimensions up, and they actually come into this dimension a lot. And a lot of times they can take human form. And we don't believe that. But that's why, I don't think the world's going to end. They're always predicting the end of the world, right? It's going to happen any minute. And it never does. And though I do think the world goes through major traumatic cycles, and we see this constantly. But these are, I think, in concert with the waves of souls that are constantly coming through here in the reincarnational processes we call time. And, we all see ourselves getting older every year, and we do. And we are subject to the genetics and the, trials and tribulations of this physical dimension. But
time for this one to come home.
The spirit, psyche, and soul is not. And I think that's an area that has been a little bit laxed in many different dogmatic religions. And it's very empowering to just start to look at this type of stuff.
It is very empowering, very much so. Well, thanks, Jeff. As always, thanks so much for this. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on Astrology Today with Jeff Harman. Please remember you can find us on Spotify, and we'll see you next week. Have a great week.